So a friend of mine brought me their Alpha 6300 Sony camera because it was powering on with an error. Looking online, that seemed to be an error with the shutter. So turned it on, tested it out, but it seemed like it was stuck even if I turned the power off and back on, it would still have the error. In fact, it wouldn't even turn off. The fix for that, of course, is just take out the battery. And I did that and tried it again, and it just kept having the same error over and over again. So there was nothing to do except investigate either inside the front of the camera, look at the shutter, or take it apart. Now, obviously, before taking it apart, I decided to investigate the front, which I found the shutter seemed to be stuck in the closed position. Now, I'm going to jump ahead and not show you yet taking apart the camera and whatnot. There's a lot of videos online of taking this camera apart, and I'll show you some of the specific things you want to focus on to not damage your camera. Otherwise, those other videos are good. But I'm going to jump ahead and show you what I found after I took this apart and why. After about an hour of carefully dismantling everything, I got the shutter mechanism out, and I wanted you to watch this. This shutter mechanism has a gear that lifts up an arm. When I opened up this little gearbox and removed that gear, if you look closely in that cavity, there is a little floating piece of metal. I don't know how that got in there. There's no way for it to get in there easily. I can't see where it came from. It looks like a little piece of aluminum. As I try to get focus on that, look at that gearbox. It's enclosed. Okay, this little piece of metal, it looks like it's been broken off on one side, and the other side is a nice finished smooth edge. So this broke from somewhere, but I can't tell where because everything is plastic, circuit boards, not the right kind of metal. In order for it to actually get into that gearbox, there's only one small space that could have fallen in, and there's no other metal like that near that area. I don't know where this piece came from. Now, the funny part is, I went online and I can't seem to find that discussion now, but I actually found some discussions about shutter problems on these Sony cameras. And someone, actually two different people, mentioned that when they opened the gearbox, they found a little piece of metal. They didn't describe it, but I'm only going to guess that it looks like this nub. Now, the only place that has metal like this is, as you can see, the main housing area, but it's not exactly the same color. And a lot of the metal pieces protruding are not quite that size. So it doesn't quite seem like it's from there. And I also can't find any area that looks like it broke off. So it's a big mystery. So I'm just going to keep this piece of metal on the side and maybe one day I'll figure it out. If anyone else has this problem and finds that same piece of metal, um, please leave a comment or a picture. That'd be great. Otherwise, let's get back to the video. Now I'm speeding up the video um, so that we don't have to focus on the areas that don't matter. And I'm going to slow it down whenever I want to focus on something. The reason I video this is because I want to be able to know what I did, what parts I took out from where. Now taking a look at the screws, you can see there's either deposits or metal shavings or something. You want to make sure that that doesn't fall back into the camera. Oftentimes these cameras are taken to the beach or exposed to salt air, salt water, and it'll dry and the minerals will end up being stuck near these openings. So make sure to carefully remove these and try not to let it fall into the camera. And if it does fall into the camera, don't blow compressed air cans into the camera because that'll often dislodge deposits and it'll get on something like the sensor. Sometimes there's oil and grease or grease that's supposed to be there in some gears, and sometimes that grease will blow onto the sensor. So always be careful. Use light air or a air bulb like they use for blowing dust off of photographs. Now, once again, I like to clean these as I find it. Make sure it doesn't get back in the camera. And this also gives you an idea of what you might expect when you open the camera up. Depending on the area I'm brushing, I like to use either a nylon brush or sometimes a steel brush. Now, in the battery compartment, there are 3 screws. I'm only taking out one right now because that holds the outer housing. The other two actually hold 2 different areas. Now, since we're going to take the whole thing apart, I could have taken all the screws out. I'm trying to figure out the order of the screws. It's really complicated. As an example, the one screw I took out holds the housing. One screw towards the back of the camera holds the actual back of the inside housing. And the last screw holds the top portion of the camera. So even though the screws are in the battery compartment, they hold the 3 different parts of the camera together. So as you're watching this video, I'm actually not taking the screws out in any particular order other than um, whatever I think I need to take apart the next piece. Now, I'll always record what you're doing so you know what screw goes back where, and always keep your screws in an organizer somewhere. On the side, I do actually have a compartmented organizer. Here's another example. The first screw I took out actually holds the top of the camera down. That second screw I just took out actually holds the back of the camera. Without taking out that screw that I just took out, the back of the camera won't actually pull off. Now, back in the battery compartment, that last screw I'm taking out right now actually holds the top of the camera on also. So there's a screw at the bottom there and a screw on the top. Now that screw I'm taking out right now also holds the back of the camera on. So 2 screws in the battery compartment and 2 screws from the top of the camera actually work together to hold both the back of the camera and the top of the camera on. I know that sounds confusing, but if you try to actually do it yourself, make sure you take all of those screws out before you try to pull off the back. Now there's also a hidden screw. It's underneath this uh, plastic cover. It's just held on with like sticky adhesive. If you don't take off this screw, you'll accidentally pull off this whole dial. So we do have to take this off before the back of the camera comes off. Now at this point, we can actually start taking off pieces of the outer housing. You do have to wiggle them. They're plastic. They can bend a little. So when that comes off, you see more screws. That screw right there connects the back of the camera. Now, at this point, the back should be able to come off if the LCD screen is removed. So those tiny screws on the bottom edges of the LCD screen, once removed, the LCD screen should come off. Now, I didn't want to force it, so initially I didn't actually take it off, but it should be able to wiggle free. The thing to be careful though is that there is a um, flat cable connecting the LCD screen. So that's the reason why I didn't want to force this, because of that cable right there. You see that cable? So I did not just try to pull this off. So I actually eventually saw that the whole back housing was able to come loose. So I started to wiggle it to see if I could get that off. Now, once again, there are other videos of people taking apart cameras, but the reason I wanted to do this one is because the other videos I saw, they were just pulling pieces off. I wanted to make sure that you know that if you just pull pieces off, you might actually rip cables. So you can see me carefully prying this open, even though it should come free. I'm being extra careful because I didn't want to rip any cables. If you look closely as I lift this up, there is a cable under there. So we want to carefully remove those cables right there. So it's still connected. It looks crooked because it's just bent at an angle. But if you look at the cable, you'll see that it's connected into a circuit board, and there's a little flap on the bottom edge. It's hard to see. Let me see if I can get a closer or more clear look at it. Right there where the tweezers are, there's a flap. It's like a light switch. It flips up. So you don't want to just pull this cable out you want to lift up that flap, and that releases tension on the flat cable, and it should lift up. And you do want to be careful lifting it up. You see there's actual little tabs on the end. You can actually push the tabs up carefully, not too quickly. You don't want to break those. And it should allow the cable to come out of the socket. There we go. And now we can remove the back housing and put it off to the side. Some of the cable connectors don't have that little flip up fastener. So be careful not to try to flip up a piece of the socket and actually break the socket. Some of them just need to be carefully pushed out of the connector, like this one right here. Once confirming it's not stuck on there with a fastener, we can just kind of wiggle that free. Now that whole piece, that blue area, is held on by a metal clip. Once we verify that nothing will be pulled and break, we can actually just remove that metal clip and the whole piece comes out. Now this plate on the back, metal plate, is held on by a few screws along the edges. The top right here, this is one, which we didn't see earlier because the plastic backing was covering it. So we'll take that off. And we already took the one out on the side. And there's the two on the bottom here. These two on the bottom also hold the plate that holds the camera to your tripod. So these have to be secured very well. You can also see there's a little corrosion around that, so we'll clean that off. Now, after the plastic backing was taken off, we see that there's actual screws on the right side of the camera. So we'll take off the screw that's holding that back metal housing. And there's also, well, my camera kind of wasn't focused or pointed right. I didn't realize I was zoomed in right there. So you can't see it, but there we go. Took off another screw that holds the top. Then there's one screw on the top back that also holds the metal housing. So let's get that. And once again, I'm placing these on the side into a compartmented little plastic box so I can tell which screws I took out and from where. So before pulling this metal piece off, there's the little plastic circuit wires. See that brown area right there? That's actually attached to the metal. So we need to take that off. Now, plumbing it with these tweezers, it's actually pretty loose. It's not screwed on or glued on or anything. It is actually just held on by little metal tabs and poked through these plastic tabs or plastic little spikes. So look closely, you can actually just lift this off the plastic. Be careful not to rip the brown, I don't know what to call it. It's not a circuit board. It's just a flat plastic piece with the wires going through it like a circuit. And then it's held on by these metal tabs. So we have to remove it a certain way at a certain angle so that it actually comes loose. Once it is loose though, you will be able to take off the metal bracket behind it. The next step is to take off the top of the camera. Now we've already taken off screws on the sides, on the back, and from the top. But there's also one screw that's inside the battery compartment, so don't forget that. Also be careful when you lift up the top of the camera because it is connected by one flat ribbon cable which could rip if you pull it too hard. What's interesting about this cable is there's a little hole in the center, which looks like it's supposed to be used to help remove the cable. Now, once again, I focused a little off, but there we go. I put my tweezers inside that hole and I gently pulled up the cable. There is one screw on the top to remove the housing for the manual view piece, the viewer where you actually put your eye against. Now the viewer doesn't actually come out, just the cover. So there's nothing attached, no wires, nothing there. What I'm removing are the screws that hold down a metal piece that acts as a heatsink. You can see it's lined with copper. Now there's a number of screws that go around it. And if you look closely, there's like kind of a black or plastic tape over parts of it. One thing about this piece is those plastic parts along the top um, kind of go into channels to separate wires and keep metal parts from touching, I think. But also underneath this, over the top, is an actual tape that's kind of sticking to some flat cables. You don't want to actually pull this out because you might actually pull the cable. So I am slowly lifting it up so I can see where it attaches, and you can also see some silicone material underneath. There's white that connects the heatsink to the chips. Okay, focusing back on the top of that piece of copper there. If you look closely, I'm lifting up a loose piece of plastic flap, but under there is a thinner piece of tape that looks the same color. It's actually stuck, and pulling this would actually rip out cables, so you don't want to just pull this out. Let's see if we can get a closer look in there. That side toward the left is not tape. It's just plastic positioned in between the cable and metal. On the right side is tape. And let's just skip ahead and take a look at the tape. So I've sped up the film here, but you can see that I am slowly lifting up sticky edge of tape. You don't want to pull this too fast, and you don't want to pull it straight up. You want to pull it kind of sideways a bit so it doesn't pull out the cable. You can see see that cable under it. If you pull straight up, it's going to rip that cable. So I'm pulling it a little bit to the side just to loosen it. Once that whole piece of tape is released from those flat cables, that copper piece should slide right out. And there it is, it's loose. So the copper piece should just slide right out. Now to get the actual eyepiece off, there's one screw. I'm taking it off right there. One thing about this screw is once you get that off, the eyepiece is loose, but there's two cables. One large cable on the bottom and one smaller one on the right side. And we need to remove that one on the right side. However, it won't come out unless you pull it out a certain angle without breaking the attachment. So you actually have to get the larger cable to come out. And this is a cable that also has a little locking mechanism, but it's on the cable side. So flip that over, pull the cable out, then we can twist over the eyepiece to get the smaller sensor out. Now this main board is where all of the cables from all the different parts of the camera connect. So you can see flat cables on the top and bottom and both sides. Be careful because these cables are easy to break or crack. Some of them have fasteners that have locking mechanisms and some don't. So as if you can see that one doesn't, but you can just carefully kind of wiggle it out. And this one does have a fastener. So you have to unfasten that first before you wiggle the cable out. So carefully look at each of these connectors as you take them out and remember that where they all have cables going to, because when you put this back together later, it's easy to have one of the cables accidentally left underneath the board so you don't see it. And after removing all the screws, that board lifts up on the right side, and that plastic piece that was on it on the left side comes up with it. I had the camera zoomed in the wrong place, so it's hard to see it, but you can see that piece right there that was dangling. Now be careful not to break any of those cables because they're still there and they're on the side of the metal. That capacitor that I just pointed to is something you want to watch out for because it holds a charge. I know there are other videos from other people for the A6300 that show discharging the capacitor. It would be safer if you don't have experience with capacitors. Capacitors, be very careful. Now we're going to remove all of these screws around the metal piece. putting them in our screw compartment holder on the side so we know where they go. And this piece doesn't have very many cables attached directly to it, except if you look a little bit towards the left on the upper corner, there's that one cable, making sure nothing else is attached. Oh, there's one more screw. Um, be careful about that cable on the upper left because it actually goes through a hole through here and we don't want to accidentally rip that cable. So if you look under that cable that we pulled out of the board, there's actually another cable. Let's see if we can, I keep pushing the camera out of the frame there, but there's another cable under there. We want to make sure we detach that. I think at this point it might be detached already. And now there are a couple of sensors right above the lens mount that do also need to be removed. You can see that there's wires channeled around it that we need to carefully get out of the way so we can remove the boards and the brackets. You can see it dangling there. And this whole piece starting to lift up a bit. There's a couple hidden screws under the flash mount. Now I keep moving the camera out of frame because I never intended this to actually be a video. I just wanted to kind of keep track of what I was taking apart. But you can kind of see, get an idea of where I'm getting this, putting the screwdriver so you know where the screws go. And right there you can see that flat cable I was talking about. It's actually still attached. So as we remove this, you'll see that there's yet another cable. So just be very careful. As I'm removing this, I see that there's another sensor on the side that is attached. And that has to be removed at a certain angle. It's not mounted in, it's not screwed in or glued in, it's just clipped on. As long as you get it at the right angle, it'll come off. So once again, the reason I made this video is so that you can see some of these little caveats to taking this apart that I saw other people's videos didn't emphasize. So if you follow someone else's video and just pull things off the way that their videos seem to show, you will rip these cables. That's why this video is a bit longer. All right, this one has a little locking mechanism, so make sure you keep track of which ones have and don't have those. Okay, for me, this is the part that was the trickiest. I got the metal plate off, but it seems to be connected to the capacitor. I can't pull that because it'll rip the capacitor. What I found is you have to actually open the battery door and lift that whole piece out. Without lifting out the battery door, it'll just be stuck, or you'll force it and it'll rip. So, yeah, surprisingly, that was the trickiest and hardest thing for me to figure out. It took me like 20 minutes fiddling with it. It was silly. So after peeling away all those layers, everything looks a little simpler. Just simply take off the uh, copper heatsink bracket that holds the sensor and lift it off. Now this is the sensor, so be careful, don't scratch it. Put it on the side carefully. Now one thing I want to point out is at this point, I actually turned the camera over and dropped pieces out. You can see the pieces fell right there. If I didn't have this video, I wouldn't have known where they go. So just to quickly go over them, those spacers fit along pegs and screws on the top, bottom, and left side of the sensor. And I think they're used to kind of level off the sensor to the front of the camera to make sure it's flush properly. So we got to make sure to put those back before we close everything up. So we're getting close to the target. The target is this shutter mechanism, which is the motor on the left side and a shutter arm gearbox on the bottom. But to get this off, we need to remove that cable, which seems to be kind of buried in the battery mechanism area or battery compartment. So we need to lift that up a little bit just to slide that cable out. So be careful not to rip or pull any cables. Let us unscrew one more screw to lift up the battery compartment. I know you might think you can just kind of get a tweezer and then slide it around, but the tweezers might actually rip the cable. So we want to be safe and just take off the screw. Carefully lift everything up and remove that little cable. It looks like it has some kind of tensioners on the side, so we'll pull that out. There we go. So now we have completely taken apart the camera all to get to this mechanism. Now I've already spent about 10 minutes testing the mechanism that's on the right side of this whole piece. So I've determined it's working fine, so we're just going to remove it, and I'm going to focus on that metal bracket that has that control arm and motor on it. Because as I spun this manually, it seemed like it was getting stuck. So there's something wrong inside the gearing, or something's broken, or something. So we're going to carefully take this apart. Always be careful because there's springs in here, and the gearing might not easily go back together if you take it apart and the spring pops. So we're holding it together with our fingers as we took the screw off, and see how we're holding it, pinching it. Again, I'm focused in the wrong area, sorry. But we're going to slowly lift this and take a look inside. Okay, there's another piece that needs to come off that is holding it in place. That sliding arm is kind of keep preventing me from pulling it open. So let me see if I can explain it, even though it's off camera. That sliding arm has a screw right there. You can see the screw. That if you take off the screw, you can twist that little peg and it'll come out of that metal slider. And you see it just popped right off. Now the arm is free. There's one flat cable that you need to be careful not to break. So I'm going to carefully turn this over so you can see the gearing mechanism. And the arm is not stuck. So something must be wrong in the gear, but everything else looks like it's running smoothly. So well, it's running smoothly now. I already know what's going to happen because I'm narrating this after the fact, but it seems like it's running smoothly when you test it. And what a lot of people have said when they did it, they had the same experience. It seemed to run fine. Then suddenly it doesn't work, or they'll bang the camera and it'll work for a little while. That indicates that when they bang it, they're moving something that's stuck under the gear. So at certain angles, the gear works fine. So let's see what happens when we lift the gear up. So I actually showed this in the beginning of the video. So we're back to that time again. I lifted up the gear and there was that weird piece of metal that I can't explain. Once again, if anyone knows what that is, leave a comment. I'm trying to find the forum that discussed, or two other people were discussing. They found a piece of metal, and I'm kind of curious if it's the same kind of piece of metal. Needless to say, after it was done, I put the camera back together and it didn't have that shutter problem. You can see that piece of metal is still there on the table there. And the camera on and off, and the shutter seems to open and close the way it should. So I popped on a 50mm lens, tested exposures and ISO settings, and most importantly, autofocus. And it seemed like all the functions were working as expected. I mean, it's probably going to take a lot more testing to make sure there's nothing else wrong. But as far as the shutter problem goes, it seems to be fine. So in any case, the purpose of this video, again, was for me to make sure I knew how to put it back together. So sorry for some of the shakiness and not being in frame, but this also was to figure out what the heck was that metal piece and does anyone else have that trouble? So if you know what that piece of metal was, go ahead and leave a comment.